An overgrown forest mansion in the heart of Oregon that's rumored to house a number of restless spirits. A breathtaking park in Washington where the disturbing ghost of a murdered little girl with no eyes likes to greet visitors. And a weathered former prison in Idaho harboring the tortured souls of criminals still serving time from beyond the grave await on this list of some of the most haunted places in the Pacific Northwest. Let's dive right in. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me on this journey through some of the most haunted places in the beautifully unique Pacific Northwest. Now, I'm especially excited for this one as Oregon is my home and comprises a portion of this jaw-dropping region. Recognized for its unparalleled and diverse nature expanses including beaches, snowy mountains, rainforests, deserts, and more. For its vibrant cities, unique culture, near-endless outdoor activities, and of course, for its phenomenal beer. The PNW also holds a much darker reputation, one wrought with classic ghost stories, tales of native curses, of cryptids, and accounts of encounters with all things weird and otherworldly. Are you sure you're ready for this one? Our first haunt takes us to the Emerald City itself and on a walk through Seattle's Pike Place Market. Pike Place Market, which is situated in the heart of Seattle, Washington, is an iconic public expanse boasting a number of shops and attractions in what's considered a perpetual farmer's market. That's bounds are wildly popular amongst both tourists and locals, as a place to buy great food, crafted goods, and more, and that also tie themselves to a range of chilling ghost stories and tales of supernatural encounters. Historically, this age-old market was first established in 1907 when Seattle Councilman Thomas P. Revel, while considering an 1896 city ordinance that allowed for the designating of local tracts as public markets, created one such designation right off of Pike Street and First Avenue. Subsequently, the market's first day of operation would fall on August 17th of the same year, under City Council President Charles Hiram Burnett Jr., and its very first building, being the main arcade, was established just 3 months later through November. Over its first few years, Pike Place Market would grow rapidly in popularity, and by just 1911, the demand for stalls had grown such that the number of available spaces had more than doubled. Incidentally, due to Seattle's rather wet climate, the need for rain mitigation would rise, and through this same era, a canopy and roofing was added over the west side of the stall lines to create what is now known as Dry Row. In 1916, Pike Place Market would be expanded into the Economy Market building. Through the 1920s, the north side of the corner market area would earn the title of Sanitary Market and would develop into a social scene. And around the same time, a new ordinance forbidding farmers' stalls to be placed in the street nearly resulted in the whole of Pike Place being moved somewhere else. However, the city council would eventually vote to retain the existing location, and instead would set to work on the expansion of the zone. In 1963, Pike Place would once again come under threat when a proposal to demolish the market and replace it with Pike Plaza was initiated. However, a strong public outcry would prevent its approval. And later, in 1971, an initiative was passed that would officiate the market as a historic preservation zone, while returning its management to public hands. Through the 1980s, the nonprofit organization Pike Place Market Foundation was established by the PDA under the purpose of raising funding for a free clinic, a senior center, low-income housing, and child care centers. And in 1983, the Hilt Amendment or Agreement, which derived its name from City Councilman Michael Hilt, would regulate usage of day stalls equally between farmers and craftspeople. More recently, in 1998, the PDA would vote to end the Hilt Agreement in favor of an amended Licata Hilt Agreement, which was put into effect in 1999. And in 2008, Seattle would vote on and approve a 6-year property tax levy to fund crucial repairs and improvements to the market, all of which that were completed by 2012. In the present, Pike Place Market remains open and ever popular, and offers a range of interesting shops, attractions, events, touring options, and much, much more. Over its lifespan, Pike Place Market has also grown in infamy due to a range of stories of encounters with the otherworldly, and those who frequent it have reported phantom voices heard emanating from thin air, disembodied footsteps from empty spaces, and apparitions in old-fashioned clothing sighted in passing that always vanish seconds later. One of the market's most famous ghost stories tells the tale of Princess Angeline, or Kiki Soblu, daughter of Chief Seattle of the Duwamish and Suquamish tribes, who, through the 1850s, and when Chief Seattle's people were barred from residing within the city, lived below Pike Street. Kiki Soblu would pass on in 1896 at 85 years in age, after which her body was laid to rest in the Lakeview Cemetery. To this day, many have cited the distinctive spirit of this old woman in traditional tribal garb, walking slowly through the market, especially near the stairs off Western Avenue, and several with blood ties to the Duwamish or Suquamish have spoken of encounters in which she's imparted significant wisdom upon them. The apparition of one of the original market founders, Frank Goodwin, has been known to appear in a turn-of-the-century 1900s suit, offering to guide new visitors around. The ghost of his nephew, Arthur, has been encountered swinging a golf club in his old office in what is now the Goodwin Library. The sickly-looking entity of a young stable boy named Jacob, who died in 1918 to Spanish flu, has been known to appear in the Merry Tales toy store. And the spirits of both a tall man in a suit and another man dressed in suspenders and a newsboy cap have been sighted in Kell's Irish Pub. On a side note though, Kell's probably deserves its own listing, so expect it in one of our future Washington uploads. A final Pike Place tale tells of an overweight barber woman who used to work the market that would sing until her clients fell asleep, following which she would steal all of their valuables and leave them penniless in the alley. As the story goes, one night, the floor she worked on gave in, and she fell to her death. Now, the spirit of this woman has been sighted prowling the streets after dark, singing her haunting melody into the night. Our second haunt has us exploring the heart of Oregon and touring its awe-inspiring Capitol building. The Oregon State Capitol, which is located in Salem, Oregon, is an iconic and historic structure hosting the state legislature and the offices of the governor, treasurer, and secretary of state that's grown in renown as a must-see landmark for both local Oregon residents and tourists alike, and that's aged and sprawling premises has acted as a catalyst for some of Oregon's most prolific ghost stories and tales of strong paranormal activity. Historically, from 1844 through 1845, and predating the 1848 creation of the Oregon Territory, the Oregon Country Provisional Government would select Oregon City as its region's capital. In 1850, the capital was moved to Salem for a short time, and in 1855, it was moved again from Salem to Corvallis. However, Oregon Governor George Law Curry and most of the populace would object to this final move, and later the same year, the capital was once again returned to Salem, which would be solidified as a permanent capital city through the state's Constitution circa 1864. Construction of Oregon's first Capitol building was actually started back in 1854, but following the seat of government being moved so many times over that year, the project wasn't fully completed until late 1855. Unfortunately, this structure would only serve for a short time, as on December 29th of 1855, it would burn to the ground in a very suspicious fire, after which the old Holman building, which was located right where the modern recreation the Hilton Holman stands today, was utilized as a meeting space until a new structure was designed. In 1859, Oregon would earn its statehood. In 1872, legislature would appropriate $100,000 for the designing of a new capitol. Construction of this new capitol would transpire from 1873 to 1876, and for decades to come, Oregon's second capitol building would serve the state dutifully. Sadly, however, this second capitol would share in its predecessor's fate, and while not considered suspicious this time, in 1935, another fire would consume the new structure, destroying countless artifacts, historical documents, and more. Notably, during this blaze, and at only 12 years in age, a young boy by the name of Mark would bravely assist in efforts to stop the fire for hours. 24 years later, in 1959, Oregon would recognize this small hero turned passionate politician as Governor Mark Hatfield, who would serve 8 years in office before running a 30-year stint as a U.S. Senator. A year following this fire, in 1936, construction of the third Oregon State Capitol building, and the one that's still currently standing, was started and would conclude by 1938 as the fourth newest capitol in the U.S., after which, its iconic golden Oregon Pioneer was added to its highest point. Subsequently, some controversy arose following its construction due to its cupola, which is tall and cylindrical as opposed to other states' dome-shaped cupolas. However, over the years, the public would eventually grow to love its uniqueness, which strangely symbolized its state as a whole. More recently, in 1977, the site would welcome a $12.5 million expansion which added 2 new wings toting legislative offices, hearing rooms, support surfaces, a galleria, and underground parking which approximately doubled floor space. And in 2002, the site's wings were completely remodeled with new decorations, wiring, flooring, and lighting added. Also in 2002, the Oregon State Capitol would be officiated as the first U.S. Capitol to produce solar power, and in 2007, it would open its doors for the wedding of State Rep Tobias Reed and Heidi Eggert. Strangely, in 2008, and just like those that came before it, this new Capitol building would also experience a fire. However, this time, modern fire suppression techniques resulted in little damage to the building itself. In the present, the Capitol remains open to the public and offers touring options, educational displays and materials, artifacts, artwork, and much, much more. While the Oregon State Capitol has never really played witness to true violence like some of the older capitals we've covered on the East Coast and in the South, quite simply, its halls are believed to harbor the spirits of those politicians and figures who died before their dreams for the state could be brought to fruition, as well as by the souls of those who have passed in or near. And both officials and visitors to the site have reported extreme cold spots felt in temperature-controlled rooms and across its grounds in the summertime, instances of cameras or cell phones dying on full charges, and accounts of doors opening and closing on their own. Those who have stayed late in the Capitol, being staff or night crews, have reported sighting figures rushing down various hallways and into rooms that are supposed to be locked, and then, when they check said rooms, finding them empty. And several have told of what sound to be spirited discussions heard emanating from various chambers that are completely vacant. One particular security guard who was still working Capitol grounds and as recently as 2022 reported hearing footsteps when no one else was around, as well as seeing strange forms peeking from around corners or standing right behind closed doors. A final and quite popular Capitol tale tells of board member Sandra Allen, who is highly revered at the Capitol, and who's actually written a book called Ghosts in the Capitol, which I highly recommend any with an interest check out. Now, as this story goes, a woman on the custodial team was cleaning the third floor late one night when she was suddenly overcome with a sense that she wasn't alone. She spun around on the spot and sighted the friendly, smiling face of a man in a 1970s-style casual suit that was standing only a few yards away from her. This man promptly turned and disappeared down the hallway quickly. When this employee brought her occurrence up with Sandra, Ms. Allen was actually able to locate the very same man in an old photograph kept on site, and it's now believed that he was the spirit of someone who served in the House of Representatives circa 1978. Number 3 takes us out to Idaho and has us booked at Boise's Old Idaho State Penitentiary. The Old Idaho State Penitentiary, which is situated off of the east end of Boise, Idaho, is a historic prison turned museum and educational venue that's bounds are popular amongst both tourists and locals, as well as history buffs from all walks of life, and that harbors a much darker reputation for its purported ties to some of the state's most chilling tales of supernatural phenomena. Historically, the old pen's roots trace way back to before Idaho was even a state, to when, through the 1860s, the legislature ordered the construction of a territorial prison. In 1872, the first rendition of our current penitentiary was finished as a single-room cell house, formed from sandstone bricks that were actually quarried off the nearby Table Rock through the use of prison labor. Notably, in regards to the designing of this prison, it was constructed in the Second Empire architectural style, with guard turrets and walls as thick as a fort. Through the remainder of the 19th century, prison staff would encourage inmates to work instead of rot away in their cells, and in a short time, the site would become nearly self-sustaining. In 1890, Idaho would achieve its statehood, and for decades to come, this old lockup would serve the state as a highly significant prison, in that it reduced government spending by hundreds of thousands of dollars by way of growing its own foods, supplying clean water, making its own clothes, and maintaining the site by way of a convict-fueled workforce. As more inmates checked in, slowly, the penitentiary would expand and would hit its peak through the early to mid-1900s. Through this same era, the site would also accept several infamous criminals, including Harry Orchard, who, in 1905, assassinated former Governor Frank Steunenberg, and Lydia Southard, or Idaho's Lady Bluebeard, who was arraigned in 1921 on numerous accounts of murdering her ex-husbands to collect insurance money. As the years went on, slowly, the old Idaho State Pen, which was originally designed for a smaller and much more specific purpose, would become outdated. Conditions would rapidly wane, and through the years of 1952, 1971, and again in 1973, serious riots would begin to break out. Interestingly enough, these riots were not unwarranted, and after careful public and governmental scrutiny, later, in 1973, all inmates on site would be transferred to the new Idaho State Correctional Institution, after which the old prison would close its doors for good. Later the same year, the site would be added to the National Register of Historic Places. In short order, the prison would be opened up to the public, and more recently, in 1992, the Idaho State Historical Society would record oral history interviews with 15 of its former guards, who amassed a collection of remembrances from the 1950s through close, and that are still available for study through the society to any with an interest. In 1999, one J.C. Earl would donate his personal collection of historic arms and military memorabilia to the state of Idaho. And in 2001, an exhibit toting his name that includes said collection was set up on exhibition in the pen, and includes everything from Bronze Age artifacts up through basically current era pieces. Today, the old Idaho State Penitentiary remains open to the public and offers a range of touring options, educational materials, events, games, and much more. Chillingly, at least 110 inmates would pass on within this weathered old lockup due to old age, illness, suicide, or through violent confrontations, with the suicides growing exceedingly more common amongst harsh and inhumane conditions. And it's believed the spirits of those who lost it all within the old Idaho State Pen might still linger, with both staff and visitors reporting instances of cell doors opening and closing on their own, disembodied footsteps and voices heard from empty cells, and more terrifying accounts of people actually being pushed or hit by someone or something unseen. One more diabolical location within the prison is easily that of its solitary confinement spaces, where many a man lost his mind in total isolation. Within these cells, some have told of extreme cold spots or unearthly chills felt, and shadowy apparitions have been sighted lurking in their darkened corners. Additionally, it's believed that at least one inmate died while being held here, and that his rather aggressive spirit might still be hanging around. Another hotspot across campus is that of the Pen's Rose Garden. Notably, during its earlier years, a portable gallows was set up right in this same space, and to date, those passing the Rose Garden have reported extreme cold spots even in summer, instances of personal electronics dying even on full charges, and encounters with both the spirits of two men with visibly broken necks that is believed were put to death on sight, and also with the lone apparition of a man in prison-issued gardener's attire, who tends the flowers for moments before fading away. In Cell Block 2, a rather large entity dubbed Big Louie has been known to appear suddenly to shove visitors, while Cell Block 5 harbors the spirit of one Van Vlack, who appears as a greenish light and messes with electronics, and also by the restless soul of a man who died in a botched hanging, whose manifestation makes itself known through grotesque gasping, sputtering, and choking noises. Additionally, all across Block 5, numerous other unidentified apparitions have been sighted, and the presences in this area in particular are known for being particularly aggressive towards visitors. Lastly, the multi-purpose building is said to act as an epicenter for all things weird and otherworldly. Inside, reports have detailed everything from supernatural portals to objects sighted moving on their own, the phantom smells of tobacco and food without source, lights that flicker without cause, and a chilling, disembodied laughter that rings through the space, and the restless spirit of a man who was brutally attacked and assaulted in the showers in August of 1971 has been known to appear just to poke fun at living who enter. And on to number 4, which has us returning to Washington to get some fresh air at Tacoma's Point Defiance Park. Point Defiance Park, which is placed on a peninsula northwest of the center of Tacoma, Washington, is a giant 760-acre expanse of land that boasts a zoo and aquarium, numerous flower gardens, beaches, trails, a boardwalk, a boathouse, and much more. And that, according to Washingtonian lore, is also a place toting strong paranormal energies, a place where strange and ghostly things from beyond the veil can pass over into our world. Historically, lands now encompassed by Point Defiance Park were initially frequented by tribes native to the region, including the Puyallup and Nisqually, and much later, through the early 1840s and following the Wilkes expedition, Point Defiance would be set up as a military reservation. And regarding its name, Charles Wilkes is purported to have stated that with a fort on the point and one across the Narrows at Gig Harbor, someone could literally defy the world. While park grounds held this reservation for a time, Wilkes's dream of twin forts were never seen through, and in 1888, President Grover Cleveland would authorize the point's use as a public park. By 1890, a streetcar line was developed to carry passengers from Tacoma up to what had grown into a sprawling gardens. In 1903, a waterfront pavilion was constructed, and by 1906, a seaside resort in the park had been designed under Frederick Heath and offered a heated saltwater bathing pavilion called the Nereidus Baths. In 1905, the federal government would officially grant the title of Point Defiance Park to the city of Tacoma. By 1921, a large cement arch structure was constructed next to the aforementioned pavilion and was also called the Pavilion. And through the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps would set to work on various park features, including trails, construction of a boathouse, various shelters, points of interest, and a full restoration of Fort Nisqually, which is open to this day. Through the 1940s, Point Defiance would become a popular getaway location while gas was being rationed, and an Army Air Force crash vessel with rescue crews were actually stationed at the pavilion, just in case an aircraft from Puget Sound went down in the area. In 1959, the Point Defiance Zoo would add the Children's Farm Zoo. In 1964, the privately owned children's storybook attraction Never Neverland would open its gates. And in 1984, sadly, the old 1920s boathouse would burn to the ground in a fire, after which it was meticulously reconstructed to likeness and reopened in 1988. Through more recent times, Point Defiance State Park has been modernized, upgraded, and altered on countless occasions, and has even been developed to the point that it's now considered Tacoma's crown jewel of public spaces. It harbors close partnerships with a host of horticultural, zoological, maritime, conservation, and cultural organizations, all who work in tandem to ensure the peninsula flourish. In 2005, a citywide park bond program would be approved to provide $5.5 million for the overall improvement of the park, including projects to maintain its trails, restore the old pagoda, decontaminate soil, and convert mowed turf to habitat plantings. And from the time of the project's official launch in 2008, more than 1,500 citizens have joined its park improvement board and have worked tirelessly towards a collective goal. In the present, Point Defiance Park remains open to the public and offers a wealth of opportunities for hikers, boaters, history buffs, sightseers, anglers, nature enthusiasts, and more. And for any interested in a trip to the area, several hotels and bed and breakfasts dot the outskirts of the park and are popular stays for those wishing to experience its majesty. But it's not all fun in the sun at Point Defiance, and over the years, it's built a reputation for being quite possibly one of the most haunted places in Tacoma, with those frequenting its bounds reporting extreme cold spots felt through the summer months, instances of vehicles parked near refusing to restart, and strange cries heard on the winds. One of the most famous ghost stories surrounding Point Defiance has to do with a little girl named Jennifer Bastian. In 1986, Jennifer, who was 14 at the time, was attacked and strangled to death by an unknown assailant right within park bounds, after which her body was later discovered off the main route of 5 Mile Drive, which winds across the property. While forensics weren't really a thing back then, for years, her murder went unsolved, until 2018, when a forensic team opened her file back up and conducted research necessary to finger the killer and bring him to justice. At 61 years old, the man was sentenced to 27 years in prison, which was effectively spending the rest of his life. To date, the creepy, pale apparition of Jennifer has been sighted all throughout the park and along the road, usually after dark, swaying slightly, with large dark holes where her eyes should be, and smiling ominously at those who pass. Additionally, informal investigations of park lands have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs captured in video and audio recordings, strange forms caught in the background of photography, and hits on spirit boxes, Ouija boards, and thermal grids. Finally, probably the most haunted place across Fort Defiance Park is that of its pagoda. Following the closing of Never Neverland, surviving pieces, statues, and props from the park were moved into the pagoda. Sadly, through the 1990s, a homeless man who enjoyed sleeping near the pagoda died mysteriously on its lower level patio. At some point, it's claimed another man took his own life in or near the property after his wife drowned in the lake. And in 2011, a fire would destroy the original structure while taking Never Neverland's old fairy tale creatures with it. Now, many who visit the new pagoda tell of phantom footsteps, of the disembodied sounds of a man heard crying somewhere from out of sight, as well as of deep sighs, and accounts of eerie, warren fairy tale prop creatures that move about after dark. Saving the spookiest for last, our fifth and final hunt takes us to Portland, Oregon, and has us exploring the iconic Pittock Mansion. Pittock Mansion, which is tucked away in the forested West Hills of Portland, Oregon, is a sprawling 16,000 square foot French Renaissance-style chateau that once acted as home to Oregonian publisher Henry Pittock and his wife Georgiana. Its grounds and surrounding landscapes have since been transformed into a public historic park that's widely popular amongst both locals and tourists, and that's somewhat infamous for its alleged slew of ghostly hauntings and inexplicable phenomena. Historically, circa 1834, Henry Pittock was born far from Oregon in the city of London, England. However, at only 4 years of age, his family would cross the Atlantic and settle into Pittsburgh, where the future tycoon would spend his youth as an apprentice in his father's printing shop. While Henry quickly fell in love with American city life, his soul yearned for something more, something built off the countless frontier stories and westerns that he and his closest brother, Robert, would read to pass the time. And in 1853, when Pittock turned 19, the duo chose to embark on an adventure down the Oregon Trail to seek new opportunities and fortune in the untamed territory that was soon to become a state. Notably, just a year later, Henry's future wife, Georgiana Burton, would depart Missouri with her family who sought a better quality of life on the West Coast. When the Pittocks arrived in Portland, it was little more than a stump town that was in the throes of competition with Oregon City over which would act as the territory's major trade hub and industrial center. And it's said that when Henry stepped off the wagon train, that he was barefoot and hadn't a cent to his name. Incidentally, when he applied to work as a printer for the Oregon Spectator, likely looking and smelling just how you'd expect someone to after 4 to 6 months in the wilderness, his application was rejected. And though he was offered other employment as a bartender, Henry would reject this offer and would find work as a typesetter instead for Oregonian founding editor Thomas J. Dreyer, who, at first, instead of pay, provided the young writer with room, board, and basic supplies. Following 6 months under these terms, Pittock would be granted a $900 yearly salary, which was pretty much like a $32,000 salary today. Over the following 6 years, and due to his unparalleled work ethic and writing skill, he would begin receiving partnership interest, and eventually Dreyer, who was more concerned with politics than with his business, would step down and would bestow Henry with the duties of manager and editor of the Oregonian. Additionally, over these same years, Henry would meet Georgiana Burton, and in 1860, the couple would be wed, after which, over the course of their lives, they would welcome a total of 9 children into the world, 6 of whom that would survive into adulthood. Fast forward almost 4 decades. Following massive success under the Oregonian, Henry Pittock had made a name for himself, and through the early 1900s, he began dreaming of the construction of a grand estate for he and his family, a mansion atop a hill that provided panoramics of the city he so loved. After a lengthy design process, construction of Pittock Mansion would start in 1912, and in 1914, Henry and Georgiana, accompanied by 8 other members of their family, would move into their dream home. Sadly, the couple would only enjoy the home for a handful of years, before, in 1918, Georgiana would pass on, and a year later, in 1919, Henry would join her in death. Following the loss of their patriarch and matriarch, the Pittocks would remain in the home through the 1950s, until 1958, when longtime resident Eric Ladd and Pittock grandson Peter Gantenbean finally put the estate up for sale. In years to come, the community would raise $75,000 in order to help the city purchase the site in 1964. Over the following year, it would welcome a full restoration, and in 1965, the property was opened up to the public. More recently, in 1974, Pittock Mansion was honored on the National Register of Historic Places. In the present, Pittock Mansion remains open to the public, offering numerous touring options, and is reachable by way of the Wildwood Trail, which leads through the massive and breathtaking Forest Park. Standing as pretty much the classic haunted mansion, Pittock and its surrounding landscape have long been shrouded in ghost stories, tales of otherworldly phenomena, and cryptid sightings. And those who have braved its bounds have reported disembodied footsteps heard through vacant halls, extreme cold spots, and windows and doors that are supposed to be locked found unlocked or even opened up. One more famous story surrounding Pittock has to do with its yard, right around the northern end. Interestingly enough, both staff and visitors who pass by this area either early in the morning or later at night have told of hearing the sounds of someone walking around the garden and of a shovel striking the earth. More rarely, the apparition of a shorter, elderly man in an old uniform has been sighted tending various plants near, and it's believed these phenomena can be attributed to one of the Pittock's groundskeepers, who, like them, lived and eventually died within the home. Also reported at the mansion are instances of faucets in empty rooms discovered turned up to full blast, furniture that gets rearranged overnight, and accounts of a portrait of Henry Pittock that likes to jiggle on the wall when people near it. One more disturbing story tells the tale of a worker who stayed just a bit too late on mansion grounds. As per her closing duties, she went room to room, closing doors, windows, turning out the lights, and locking up. Following her locking of the front door, this woman began crossing the yard towards where she was parked. However, midway there, an odd chill overtook her. She spun around, and to her shock, every light in the mansion was turned back on. Across surrounding trails and through nearby forests, a host of strange happenings have been reported as well, including shadowy figures sighted amongst the trees, reports of cults or witch covens that meet, run-ins with various Oregonian cryptids such as Sasquatch, Bat-Squatch, and Gumbaroo, and encounters with eerie troops of children in costumes that walk in a line chanting with candles and lanterns in their hands, with no adults present. Another of the mansion's most famous specters is that of its woman in the gown. Now, just as her name might suggest, this ghost manifests as a strikingly beautiful young lady in a long and flowing gown. And while not much is known about her origins, one more prominent tale involving her tells of a time when a staff member heard the clatter of something falling and went to investigate. When she rounded the corner into the room where this commotion had transpired, she discovered that a painting had fallen from the wall. To her shock, the woman in the gown appeared from nowhere, picked it up, and rehanged it on the wall. At just this moment, another staff member spotted our first staff member staring into the room in shock and asked if she was okay. Then, when the duo turned back towards the room, the woman in the gown was nowhere to be seen. Finally, throughout Pittock Mansion, many have reported being suddenly overcome by the strong scent of roses or maybe rose perfume, which was Georgiana's favorite scent in life. And the full-bodied apparitions of both Henry and Georgiana have been known to appear at times, embracing each other lovingly as they stare over the grounds that they so cherished in life. Thanks for joining me in exploring some of the Pacific Northwest's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you know that could use a good scare. I'll catch you all next time, and stay spooky.